Well, let's talk about, now that we know how America got involved in the war, what America was going to do to prepare for fighting this war, and really America's entry into the war. And we'll talk about actual fighting in Europe and Japan or in Asia, another lecture. FDR knew that, just like World War One, who was going to win and lose this war depended on America getting into the war and when they got involved in the war. So the Army was preparing for the war. FDR had created the Selective Service and Training Act, which was a draft, required everybody in the country, 21 to 36, to register for the draft if they were males. The Selective Service is a lottery. Numbers come up, and if your number comes up, you are drafted. The Army was becoming more diverse. At this time, around 1941, when we declared war on Japan, there were around 1 million African Americans serving in the Army. There were 300,000 Mexican Americans serving in the Army, and there were 25,000 Native Americans serving in the Army. The value of the Native Americans can't be overstated because the languages that they spoke were in a language family that was only indicative to North America. So especially in the Pacific, when we were in close combat quarters with the Japanese, the Native Americans could just get on a radio and speak on an open channel to other Native Americans, and the Japanese had no idea at all what they were saying or how, there was no way to crack that code because it wasn't a code. It was a language that they could have no way of understanding. They were called code talkers. Next slide. Oh, and women, 350,000 women, and we'll actually see a little display about the women when we get to the Air Force Museum later on in the semester. The economy, all those vegetable soup departments that FDR made to help in the Depression, he also followed that same blueprint for the Army. And here you can see two factories in the top creating tanks and the bottom creating bombers. He created the War Production Board, the WPB, and it was created to help make peacetime industries like car manufacturers into industries that produced goods for war, like tanks or jeeps. The Office of War Mobilization was a super agency that overlooked several agencies, and it would centralize all the resources we need to fight the war. Probably what's most important for us is we had all the resources we need inside the borders of the United States for the most part. Japan and Germany and Italy did not. So we were able to produce twice as many goods in 1944 than Japan, Italy, and Germany all together in that year. Our mobilization, getting ready for war, was beyond good. Next slide. This is a little graphic they showed that if you weren't sharing rides to work or to high school, that you were using too much gas. And that was gas that was probably going to be needed to fight the war. So if you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. And there's Hitler in the car next to him. He never chooses the radio station you want to listen to. Unemployment shrank. This is what really killed the unemployment during the Great Depression. The men went off to war. There were jobs open because they left, and so we had to fill those jobs, and there were jobs created to create wartime goods, not just tanks, but also things like parachutes and food and uniforms. All those industries created more jobs to help out with the war effort. Union membership rose because these were all manufacturing or factory jobs. The government spent during the war about $321 billion. In 1941 to 1945, that is a huge amount of money. Taxes went up to help fund the war, but nobody complains when you're saving the world from Nazis. Bond drives again, just like in World War I, to help pay for the war. You buy bonds. The government takes your money, and they use that money to help pay for the war, and they pay you back at the end of the war. The national debt greatly increased, but we were going to be able to pay off that debt at the end of the war, hopefully. So people were glad to go into debt during the war because it's money we had to spend to help fight the war. All right, end of this part of the lecture.